During the Trump era, the phrase fake news became incredibly popular in this nation, and in my opinion, it was a bit overused. It was a bit played out. It was kind of used for fake news and for news stories that people just didn't like. However, today's Young Turks video, and yes, we are responding to the Young Turks today, back in action, back to the origin point, going back to season 1, Sean. If you want to know what season we're on, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll tell you at some point, to the Young Turks to talk about a fake news story that they did about Dave Ramsey. And by the way, while I will be putting Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian and the Young Turks in their place for this horrific, dishonest, awful reporting that just goes to show you they're incapable of fact-checking, let it be known that this was published by The Wrap, and it went all around Twitter supposedly showing that Dave Ramsey was this evil bad guy who advocates for evicting people during the middle of the pandemic. But before we get into that, before I cure you of some of your ailments, we need to talk about your health in other regards, and yes, that is a health with justice transition. One of the reasons you get wrinkles on your face and visible signs of aging is a lack of collagen. Collagen is the protein that keeps your skin elasticy and all young looking and whatnot, and you lose about 10% of your collagen every single year. But fear not, the world is not at an end for you. You are not going to look like an old for the rest of your life, because you can go over and get some collagen powder over at healthwithjustice.com. This collagen powder is pretty simple, pretty basic. I scoop a cup in my coffee in the morning, and it definitely works. I'm not saying anything, but when I was in Texas with Nuance Bro, who apparently, allegedly, according to some people, used to look younger than me, I got carded for my purchases, and he did not. They were like, Sean, you're an itty bitty baby. We need to see some ID. This isn't gonna work. There is no way you are older than this other man. And I credit Health with Justice for all of that. Go to healthwithjustice.com, 51% off, healthwithjustice.com. So the first thing I need to take note of for this video that we're going to be talking about is the title that the Young Turks used for this video, and it reads as follows. Christian pastor slumlord evicts the needy during the pandemic. Now let's be clear about some things. One, Dave Ramsey is a national treasure. Dave Ramsey has helped more poor people than any progressive in the history of the world because he actually teaches them personal responsibility and how to manage their finances. Number two, they called him Christian Pastor Slumlord, even though Cenk had said in the past when he had no idea how to set up his media company, even though Cenk had the complete opposite ideology. Who helped him? Dave Ramsey.
Dave Ramsey, for no reason at all, when TYT was first starting out, helped us when no one else did. Just like advice and helpful stuff and calls here and there. Nobody ever does that. He talked to Dave Kohler and walk us through stuff. So he's a Christian. He talks about Jesus all the time, but he's a rare Christian that actually means it. So, I'm just giving you that background.
Now, call me crazy, call me a conspiracy theorist, call me evil, call me a dirty capitalist. But if somebody personally helped me build up my own company so that I could employ other people, I would think I would at least hesitate before I pounced on them when I thought it was convenient. Especially when we're talking about doing so for 80,000 views. Especially when we're talking about doing so over a 50-second clip that even within that 50-second clip doesn't say what the Young Turks actually allege is being said. It doesn't say what Twitter allege is actually being said. But let's roll into their video because maybe they got something. Maybe they have a point. Maybe it's crucial. Let's hear them out.
Can you be a good Christian while also simultaneously evicting individuals who can't pay for increased rent prices during a global pandemic?
Now, right after the title, there's also something known as the setup of this video. And the setup of this video is a perfect tried and true method that the left wing uses to attack people on the right when those right wing people happen to be Christian. And this is using a child's interpretation of Christianity in order to scold them based on their own standards, which is absolutely ridiculous. And if anybody can't live up to their own standards, it's Anna Kasparian and the Young Turks.
Well, Dave Ramsey, radio show host and evangelist, thinks, yeah, definitely. You absolutely can be a good Christian while evicting people and making them homeless while they're poor. Here he is making that argument on video.
But the promise of the premise may be lived up to. Anna Kasparian is alleging that Dave Ramsey argued that it is okay to evict people because they're poor during a pandemic in order to make money, and that's the Christian thing to do. And it's on video, that's what Anna Kasparian said. So I better see a video of Dave Ramsey doing exactly that, because that's what the Young Turks is reporting.
Okay, I own rental property, single-family homes, among many other properties that we own. And if I raise my rent to be market rate, that does not make me a bad Christian. I did not displace the person out of that house if they can no longer afford it. The marketplace did. The economy did. The ratio of the income that they earned to their housing expense displaced them. I didn't cause any of that. And so you are not displacing them. You're taking too much credit for what's going on. If they need to move to a cheaper house because they can't afford, they're going to move to a lesser house. Because if they move, they're going to pay market rent.
So that is the clip in question of Dave Ramsey allegedly saying it is okay to evict people from their homes during a pandemic because they're poor, and allegedly he hates poor people. Weird, it didn't sound like he was saying that. He was talking about raising the rent and how if you have to raise the rent to market rates, it is not your fault that the tenants cannot afford that rent. It's okay to do so. You don't need to fall on the sword and absorb the cost just because you think that's in line with Christianity. This is perfectly reasonable on its own, but there's something that you might not notice from the Young Turks version of the video, because the Young Turks are too busy trying to hawk you crappy products in their lower thirds for you to see what's actually going on. But I, unlike the Young Turks, and by the way, at some point they had to watch this original video before deciding to do this in the rundown, noticed something about this clip, and you could see it slightly under their graphic, but when we go to the article, it will become ever more apparent what is actually going on. You see, the video in question actually has this lower third underneath, all the while Dave Ramsey is talking. You wouldn't notice it from watching the Young Turks video because they put their crappy lower third over it, but as you can see, it says, "I feel guilty raising rent on properties," and it also attributes this guilt to Dan from Wisconsin under what also says the question of the day. So these combinations of factors, plus the way that Dave Ramsey is talking more in an advisatory way, more as a response to something that was sent in directly, would lead me to believe, and lead anybody with an IQ above room temperature to believe, that Dave Ramsey is asking a specific question from the audience. And it turns out this clip is available in its totality on Dave Ramsey's YouTube channel, and that is exactly what's happening. So already, and I do mean already, the Young Turks have been caught lying. They've been caught reporting fake news. They've been caught spreading misinformation, because they're saying that Dave Ramsey just randomly on his talk radio show said that he enjoys evicting people, or it's okay and it's actually Christian to evict people during the course of a pandemic because they're poor, but that is not the case. Dave Ramsey is clearly and obviously answering a specific question, and the Young Turks should have seen this portion in the video before they slapped their lower third over it, blocking it from view for members of their audience.
Now, as we all know, there's a huge problem with affordable housing in this country. But as a good Christian, would it not make you a bad Christian to be a vociferous supporter of the free market system, especially as it pertains to housing? I mean, like, this attempt to skirt any responsibility for making people homeless is hilarious. It's like, no, I'm still a good Christian. I'm not the one who evicted these people. It's the market, which I support wholeheartedly, that evicted these people.
So here we have Anna Kasparian's low IQ and smug takes about Dave Ramsey. Supposedly, again, she's under the misimpression that Dave Ramsey's talking about himself evicting people, by the way, not being a good Christian because he loves the free market, and how he's allegedly shifting responsibility for raising rent on his tenants when he's not talking about his tenants. And by the way, this weird notion that Christianity compels its followers to fall on the sword and not participate in the free market, not participate in voluntary exchange, and instead somehow compels people to rally together with a mob and rob other people, even though thou shalt not steal kind of a big portion of the 10 commandments. It's at least one of the 10, I'm pretty sure, and then use that to redistribute wealth in some ridiculous way that only makes people worse off, is insane. It's asinine in every way. And also, Anna talks about how there's a problem with affordable housing. Yeah, Anna, because of all the policies people like you support. Anna Kasparian, rent control causes the price of rent to go up. all this other subsidizing and regulating environmental protections and whatnot. There's a reason why Houston, who has no zoning restrictions, has very affordable housing despite the fact that they're one of the fastest growing cities in the nation, and California, which basically zoned 77% of Los Angeles, has unaffordable, price out for the middle class level housing. It's absolutely ridiculous in every way that you, Anna, the smug person who supports all this nonsense, would feel emboldened to go after Dave Ramsey, who actually literally provides this service, housing, to people who need housing that they can afford. I mean, it's absolutely absurd in every way that these commie losers go after landlords when they advocate for all these different policies that destroy housing inventory, that cause prices to go up for people in your state and nationwide, and Dave Ramsey is providing the service. So the idea that you have any authority to criticize him is insane. Why don't you fix your own household? Or better yet, go invest your own money in the real estate market, and you see if you can do a better job in real estate than Dave Ramsey.
And whatever happened to personal responsibility? So he says, I didn't do it, the market did it. No, you very literally did it. Like, you got the eviction proceedings afoot, you got the resolution, you asked for the authorities to evict them. You literally did every single part of it. Now you could say, I did it because the market says I can get more money, so I threw them out in the street so I can make more money. Okay, that's fine. That's your convictions. Money is more important. And by the way, a lot of people make that decision. And however much people want to judge you for that is a different matter. But saying you didn't do it is factually incorrect. And saying that Jesus would have been in favor of it, hence you're a good Christian, is preposterous.
You want to tell me that you don't know what the hell you just watched without saying those words? Just repeat exactly what Jenk said. First of all, Dave Ramsey never mentions the word eviction, not once. It does not happen. So the idea that Jenk is saying you literally did it, you went through all these steps, you took him to court, you kicked him out the house, when he actually was answering a question from a person. Like, let's see the actual clip, the video clip of the question being posed to Dave Ramsey so you can understand how off base the Young Turks are.
Today's question comes from Dan in Washington, D.C. I'm a landlord who owns multiple rental properties. Over the past year or two, rent prices have seen a big increase. This is great for a landlord, but not so great for the tenant. I know I need to raise my rental rates to keep up with the increased overhead costs. However, this causes direct hardship to my tenants that have been good tenants for the past few years. As a Christian, this is hard for me. I would feel bad if raising rent caused them to have to move after they've made the house their home. I did not get into real estate to subsidize people's living expenses, but I also didn't get into real estate to displace families either. I love investing in real estate, so I don't see myself exiting this field, so I'd like to hear your advice on how to balance this equation.
So yeah, that was the question that was submitted to Dave Ramsey that he was responding to. So now you know for sure that the Young Turks did not do any research at all into this video whatsoever, because clearly they're pinning everything on Dave Ramsey and talking about evictions, when eviction was not the topic being brought up in this video or in this question. He's talking to a landlord who says, hey, look, the cost of everything is going up due to inflation. You know who advocated for spending a crazy amount of money like nut jobs because they didn't believe it would cause inflation? People like the Young Turks, by the way. And I have to raise rent, otherwise I'm going to lose a lot of money and potentially lose this household. What should I do? They're good tenants. I feel bad about this. He's asking Dave Ramsey for that advice. But let's continue on the trajectory of showing beyond any shadow of a doubt that the Young Turks don't do any fact checking. They don't look into stories any more than a superficial level. And they just like attacking people who are Christian and conservative, even if they help the Young Turks personally, because they're scummy like that and they hate the other side more than they actually like the poor. Remember, the left does not care about the poor. They just hate the rich.
No, but what he's kind of implying is that Jesus would not be in favor of it, but it doesn't matter. He's still a good Christian because it's not that he's doing this. It's that the market's doing this. No, you're the landlord. You get to decide here. And his decision, and by the way, like, Dave Ramsey ain't hurting. Okay, Dave Ramsey isn't like someone who poured his entire life's work into buying one rental property, which he now relies on for his retirement. This guy is tremendously wealthy. And I give you that not because I think, oh, the very nature of him being wealthy automatically makes him a bad person, My point is, he is going out of his way to defend this behavior despite the fact that homeboy don't even need the money. It's just, what are you doing, bro?
So then Anna, of course, rants about how Dave Ramsey is wealthy. Dave Ramsey's a rich guy. Dave Ramsey shouldn't do this. Dave Ramsey's so scummy. He doesn't need the money, even though, again, we're not talking about Dave Ramsey. I feel like this debunking is pretty much over. And now I'm just pouring gravy all over this delectable meal that I served up for you guys out there in the audience. But it actually gets worse because Anna wants to show him up even more. So she brings a quote from a pastor who also has no idea what the hell they're talking about.
And by the way, TMZ caught up with a pastor to ask his thoughts on Dave Ramsey's comments. And I want to just quickly give you his quote. He says, quote, "We are absolutely responsible when our actions displace others from their homes. The Son of Man had no place to rest his head, and it sounds like Dave wouldn't give him one for even a penny under what he thinks market value is."
To attack Dave Ramsey as if this random left-wing pastor that Anna Kasparian found is good enough to attack Dave Ramsey, even though Dave Ramsey was answering a question of somebody who came in.
Yeah. No, Anna, they didn't change the money. The market changed the money. So Jesus would have been fine with the money changers. Because, hey, look, it's just the markets. The markets required money changing, which, by the way, is somewhat true. But if you're a good Christian, well, you know what Jesus did. He threw the money changers out of the temple because that's not what a good Christian does. Agree or disagree on whether you should do it is a different question. But to say that, no, good Christians love money changers and they love, throwing the poor and the needy. Well, they're bums and you throw them out and you give them a good boot on the way out and then blame a generic market. That's what Jesus would have done. There seems to be solid evidence that is not what Jesus would have done.
So then Jen goes into this whole thing with Jesus and the money changers and says, wow, that's not Christian. Well, I'm Cenk Uygur, expert on Christianity. Dave Ramsey's such a bad Christian. I mean, all he does is help poor people get themselves out of debt by giving them basic steps for them to follow and then celebrates with them. And he literally profits off of helping people, serving his fellow man. What does he even know about Christianity? He's just throwing poor people out of the street because he's a scumbag loser ass, man. He's so rich, what's even wrong with him? Now, that setup is so perfect for this other part that, again, is in the same video of Dave Ramsey talking about circumstances where he would not evict. And I just want to play it for you because remember, the whole segment is about Dave Ramsey allegedly heartlessly evicting poor people and disassociating himself from doing that because he just wants to make a few more dollars in profits. Those evil bad man profits. Let's see what, again, is in the same video clip that the Young Turks, if they would have bothered to listen to more than the 50-second video. By the way, this comes from a 3-hour radio show that aired that day. There's obviously more context. If they would have sought any of it, they would have heard this.
I've had situations, because I manage the properties with a heart and a head, both. I don't personally manage them, but we do, my family does. That someone is sick. I'll just, I remember one time, a long time ago, a lady had cancer. Am I going to evict someone in the middle of chemo? No, I'm not. I'm going to work with them. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to have clear conversations. I want to know what's really going on. I don't want to be duped by the situation. But on the other hand, I also want to treat other people like I'd want to be treated. That's a biblical mandate. And so if I were in that situation, how would I want to be treated? Well, I'd love some mercy, some grace. But mercy and grace, because rents went up in general, and I can't afford to live here anymore because my job didn't go up as much as much as the cost of a loaf of bread or a gallon of gasoline went up, because welcome to inflation. This is not something you caused. Now, you didn't cause the cancer either, but that is a temporary thing. This other thing's going to be there forever. That family is never going to be able to afford to live there if they can't afford to live there. It's not going to change. Now, if they come in and they go, I'm getting a raise in 4 months, and here's the contract, can you wait then? Yeah, I'll give them a little mercy.
Yeah, that's right. The very same video that the Young Turks attacked Dave Ramsey for being allegedly heartless, he talks about how you should manage your properties with the heart. You should treat others as you would want to be treated in a fair way. And he talks specifically about how he didn't want to evict somebody that had cancer. He worked with this person because they were sick, and these are special circumstances where you don't go after somebody or try to ruin their lives when they're in a tight spot. The very message that the Young Turks are trying to lecture Dave Ramsey about is actually in his video. And unlike the Young Turks, who again have not provided any property for anybody to rent, they haven't done anything except advocate for bad policies that make housing more expensive, not more affordable, to lecture him on what he's actually doing, the life that he's actually living, is shameful and ridiculous. Remember, I started this, or at least in the beginning of this, I showed you a clip of Cenk saying that Dave Ramsey, out of the kindness of his own heart, helped him set up his company. Dave Ramsey was spreading the charity around, and this is the reward he got from helping people that are absolute scumbags, liars, and totally dishonest and lazy. That's the key word. They just saw something on Twitter, they just saw this crappy rap article that they linked in the description, and didn't think that among Dave Ramsey's 3-hour show, there was more context. They didn't think in Dave Ramsey's YouTube channel where he posts clips, the 6-minute clip wasn't even worth watching for them. They just went off the assumptions they wanted to go on because they wanted to say right-wing bad, Christians bad, and they didn't care about the facts of the story. Christianity is not a suicide pact. Altruism to the point where you're self-destructing is not a virtue in any way. If you haven't heard this phrase, I'm gonna say it, but it should be commonplace. It should go without saying. Charity starts at home. You need to have your own house in order before you start worrying about others. These are basic tenets of reality, and they're perfectly in line with the Christian faith. You shouldn't give away absolutely everything to the point where you die, because then all the people that depend on you won't be able to function without you. This whole video from the Young Turks reeks of their unearned sense of moral superiority. They didn't fact check it, they're lazy, and they're in no way, shape, or form more moral than Dave Ramsey. They're not even remotely intelligent, because when I see something that says question of the day, I assume, because it's a radio show host, that he's answering a question that he got that day. You know, that's kind of how that works. That's a logic-based assumption. But the Young Turks are all about virtue signaling. These people who advocated for only policies that hurt poor people, only policies that hurt the prospect of affordable housing, are going to lecture somebody who's providing housing to people because they think they know better. Absolutely shameful and disgusting. And again, need to emphasize, Cenk says that Dave Ramsey went out of his way to help him set up his company, so when Cenk was an ignorant buffoon just like now, Dave Ramsey stepped in out of the kindness of his own heart, but Cenk couldn't return the favor because he's truly scummy. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, you can show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. You can follow me on all my social medias. You can support me via the support links in the description box. This has been me talking about the Young Turks completely lying about Dave Ramsey. Till next time.